Welcome, everybody. Thanks for downloading another episode of Wigs for Wigs. I'm Joe Cook, and we're here for the kickoff of Season 5 of Wigs for Wigs. It's been an interesting end to the summer here, where we've been on hiatus. A lot has been happening. I'm not sure how much we'll be able to get to today, but we're going to start recording these with some more regularity again here in this new season. And today we are going to focus on some of the latest news. That is the government shutdown, how that's affecting things, what the messaging should be, perhaps, especially on the Democratic side regarding the shutdown. And we'll see how things spin off from there. But that's the plan for today. So how's everybody doing? How's the end of your summers been?
Very good. Very good. Looking forward to getting in the regularity mode with regard to the podcast, because there is a lot going on.
What are your thoughts on the shutdown? Let's start with you, Bill.
Well, I think both sides have carved out their position. I think the Trump administration, especially Vought, is going to use this as an opportunity to lay off more workers. I also think that they just want to basically iron-proof the big, beautiful bill. I think the Democrats obviously want something out of this. In fact, there was a little movement on this, but I don't think it satisfied the Dems. The Dems want to restore the cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, and thus preserving Obamacare. And I know that the Republicans basically made an offer yesterday to extend Obamacare for a year, which I don't think flew too well with the leadership of the Democrats, especially Hakeem Jeffries. Ironically, the strange political bedfellows was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, even though she feels it's a bitter pill, she wants Obamacare to continue. Now, obviously, it's basically going to cost her if healthcare goes down the tubes, or i.e. Obamacare in her own state. But that was another second time, I would say, in months that her views have been, somewhat consistent with Democratic views. So both sides are entrenched. I do think the tipping point is going to be as the airports get worse and worse due to the shutdown and the air traffic controllers. I think that that's going to force the Republicans to the table, i.e. Donald Trump. I think business and personal flying is going to be commanding it. The airports are a mess right now, and they're getting worse.
All right, so Bill gives a wholehearted endorsement to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Doctor, what are your thoughts?
Well, just tying to what Bill said, it was funny because the reason she said she was against cutting the Obamacare was because her children would have to pay higher premiums. So it was kind of very self-serving. So I'm not sure if that was the right thing to say, but obviously, given the space Jews and so on, she very rarely says the right thing. But, in my opinion, it's slightly different. I think the Democrats made a mistake in kind of forcing the shutdown largely because the Republican Party is now the party of the working class. So the working class people, if indeed the premiums are going to go up, the working class people are going to be most upset, and those are mostly Republicans. So the Democrats' plan should be, I'm sure is, to win the 2026 election in the House and maybe even the Senate. And if people get angry primarily at the Republicans, that would really help them. This way, it's going to be split. Some people are going to be angry at the Democrats. Some people are going to be angry at the Republicans. And secondarily, as was pointed out, Russell Vogt is going to cut people's jobs. So I think it was bad timing. I think the Republicans should have just kept talking about healthcare because that's their point. I mean, it's not enough to just say we are against Donald Trump. So if healthcare is going to be their agenda, that would have worked much better for them than shutting the government down.
Well, and that brings us to what we're going to discuss. I think the bulk of this episode is what exactly should the messaging be on each side. I think the Republicans are much more effective at messaging than the Democrats are, but we'll come to that later. I wanted to let the judge have some initial thoughts.
Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene said something else that was very interesting, and that is that the Republicans have never come forward with a health care plan. And I think really that's the pitch that the Democrats should continue to make. What are you going to do about it? Okay? And so although I know we all know that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a polarizing figure at best, she's smart. She's smart. And she knows how to articulate an argument, and she made a very insightful point about the lack of any Republican plan. And of course, we hear from President Trump about laying people off. Now, that's interesting politically, because that's going to definitely hand the election in Virginia to the Democrats. And just to digress slightly, here in New Jersey, when President Trump announced the rescission of the federal money for the Gateway project, that's, I think, an issue for Jack Ciattarelli. And I have a prediction. In about 2 weeks or less, we are going to hear that the audit of the contracts has been completed and the federal money for the Gateway project has been restored. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I'm correct.
It's our first prediction of this season.
First prediction of this season, and we will see, in my opinion, we're going to see that come to pass. It'll be the quickest audit of $1 billion contract in the history of the United States.
Hey, you said the elections in Virginia. Are you thinking more ahead to next year congressional elections or the governor's race there?
I was thinking specifically about the governor's election, but also to 2026. And I also don't think that that's going to happen. The layoffs. I don't think it's going to happen. At least not on any sort of scale that is going to have a real effect.
Oh, but only Democrats will be laid off. It's only these.
Well, really, when you see the way President Trump presents these arguments with absolutely no subtlety whatsoever, and we know that that's his style, but it's come to the point now where it's almost a situation where we've discussed this before. You almost can't take what he says seriously, because every day he comes up with something. And the vast majority of times it never comes to pass. But we can continue down that road.
Isn't the problem, though, that sometimes it does, and then you run the risk that...
No, sometimes it does, and sometimes it's very concerning. I think we all are very concerned, and rightfully so. There's
his talk about sending troops into the cities, which he's shown he will do if he's allowed to do it. And then there's his talk about, the Democrats shut down the government because they want everybody to be transgender.
The sick part of it is that has anyone seen the thing he sent out on social media to the tune of Fear the Reaper, Fear the Grim Reaper, that song with him in the Grim Reaper outfit and Voight in the Grim Reaper outfit? I mean, it was crass and ludicrous, but there was smacks of truth to it. I mean, he sent that out on a government platform. He did not send that out on Truth Social. Which is a violation of the Hatch Act, isn't it? You're not supposed to use governmental platforms for obviously political reasons.
It's adorable. You think we still have standards and laws like that?
Yeah, I mean, well, no, there doesn't seem to be any laws. It seems.
I don't want to get off track, but did anybody watch Pam Bondi yesterday?
I watched it a little bit, but not not that much of it. Just her interaction with Adam Schiff.
I mean, she had with Schiff, she had with Dick Durbin, she had with Sheldon Whitehouse. It's always been my understanding that the attorney general is not the president's private lawyer, an attack dog. They're supposed to be a independent Justice Department. That's not what Pam Bondi sounded like in testifying to Congress yesterday.
But I think the problem here in America is that, the attorney general is appointed by the president. So it's kind of a political position. So the person, whoever it is, whether it's Bondi or anybody else, must have a really difficult time, because sometimes that person may need to go against the president, yet he's being appointed by the president. So I am right now in Zurich, so I am pretty familiar with the European system, and in most of the European countries, the Minister of Justice is not a political position, or they will have two people. One is the Minister of Justice, and one would be, let's say, the Attorney General. But, it should be a apolitical position, because I totally agree with you. That was the same with William Barr, Jeff Sessions. They were all these, when you have a president who wants that person to be their personal lawyer, that person is in a conflict, because he's kind of beholden to the president, but yet he has to go against the president. And this particular president doesn't respect any norms. That's just part of him.
But I have criticisms of Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions, but I don't remember any point where they were as blatantly just being a partisan hack for the president.
Yeah, and that's why they basically lost favor. That's why Jeff Sessions was fired. And that's why William Barr also became out of favor to Trump. So that's the problem. Like, if it was not a political position, then they could just ignore him.
I mean, saying I'm not going to answer oversight questions to the oversight committee because you, Senator, don't like President Trump, that defeats the purpose of the oversight committee, among other things.
Absolutely. Or if Trump orders her to go after Comey and Schiff and all these other opponents,
Well, we could talk about Comey a little bit too today if we want to, but
yeah.
Can I just bring this up? It just speaks to the lack of historical perspective that anybody in the Trump administration has. If Pam Bondi researched history and saw what happened to John Mitchell when he was Attorney General, John Mitchell went to jail for basically doing illegal stuff for Richard Nixon. And it's not a reach to say that Pam Bondi is going to own this stuff or these prosecutions herself. It's kind of sad to see that. In fact, it took a couple of attorney generals in the Nixon administration for somebody to stand up to him, and basically he kept firing people, but ultimately the rule of law did hold. I'm not so sure now.
But again, there's a difference there between then and now, that Richard Nixon fired all these people in the Saturday Night Massacre, and it's a big part of what ultimately led to his downfall, that it proved his guilt in many people's eyes, including Republican senators who ultimately told him he had to go. Whereas now Donald Trump fires the prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia, which is a pretty important position. I mean, it's not just prosecuting James Comey in this bogus case against him. They handle a lot of cases, the Eastern District of Virginia, terrorism cases, things like that, that now they have this insurance lawyer running the show who doesn't seem like she even understands things like the grand jury process.
Judge, what did you make of the woman who basically is representing the government in the Comey case? What of her performance?
The new U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia?
Yes.
She has no idea what she's doing. I mean, it's that simple. You talk about being a political hack. That's it, right there. And it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace.
Go ahead, Doctor.
But it resonates. You see, these issues, I'm sorry to say, these issues resonate with us, but they don't resonate with a large segment of the U.S. population, the voting population.
I think that's true.
They are not disturbed by this like we are. We have to stop. The Democrats have to stop misreading what's going on. People are concerned about here. And I don't mean to sound brazen here. They're concerned about Money. Period. That's why Trump got elected, in my humble opinion. It comes down to that. It's the economy, stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
But that was, that statement was from George H.W. Bush, right? So basically that was always the case, that people are mainly concerned about money, no matter
Correct.
who the president is. But ultimately, I think it's going to depend on what happens. So let's say if these health premiums go up severely, this will affect particularly the people who live paycheck to paycheck. And these are the people who are right now mostly Republicans. And if they get upset, then they will vote that particular party out of office. The same goes with tariffs. If the tariffs cause a lot of inflation, the same thing is going to happen. So ultimately, I still have belief in democracy, because if he, let's say, screws up on these particular issues which affect the economy, then he's going to be out of favor.
I agree with you 100%.
I agree with what Michael said, but I disagree earlier premise about who owns this. If you look at all the polling, the president owns this. The person who basically is in the Oval Office is usually held responsible. And the numbers are staggering. They're in the 60s, the mid 60s, who are blaming Trump, not the Democrats. So right now, the Democrats have somewhat of a honeymoon, but they do have to make hay with this. Now, there was a little movement, like I said. Possibly there'll be more movement. And I agree with Eddie. Something in New Jersey, like the Gateway Project's funding. And by the way, it's more than $1 billion. It's closer to like $3 billion.
Right. You're right.
And honestly, I could see that happening when there's some rationality with Trump. Although I don't think he's all there. I honestly believe that. I think he's, you don't see him for almost a week at a time. There was talk even among Republicans of his demise. Was it last week, from Tuesday to the latter part of the week? No sight of him. I don't know. I got a feeling that basically something's going on with him, and Michael could maybe speak to that in terms of medically or psychologically.
Well, I mean, I can only say I don't know. I haven't examined him. I mean, what is kind of paradoxical is that, in medicine, in most hospitals now, if you are over 70 and if you are a physician, you have to go through a cognitive test in order to maintain your credentials, your privileges, But if you are a politician, you don't have to do any of it. So I think the politicians after 70 should also go through a cognitive test. He's 80 years old, and almost every 80-year-old will have some deficits. So the question is how many or how much and how, but we really don't know. But I would, certainly at that age, the average age of an American in death right now is only of an American male at death is 73. So he's 80 years old. So obviously he's towards the end of his life. That's all I can say.
Well, if your doctor was Dr. Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas,
so
I don't know if he had finished that bottle of bourbon before he made that prognosis that Trump was in better health than both Obama and George W. Bush.
Well, Trump is a physical specimen. He's 6'4". He's grown since he became president. He's 195 pounds. Anybody who looks at him can see he's the most fit person who has ever walked the earth.
So, if that happens, we will have J.D. Vance. So that would be interesting what he would be like, So I guess
it's my favorite Vance quote when they basically attacked the last Venezuelan supposedly drug ship or whatever. When they blew him out of the water and I think they killed 3 people in the second one, 12 in the first one. He said, I don't give a shit about them. That was his quote. That's our vice president.
Mm-hmm.
But, going back, one thing I was going to say when we were talking about the healthcare, because the Democratic agenda is going to be healthcare. Now, I am right now in Europe, and I don't agree with too much of what Bernie Sanders say, but one thing I do agree, and you can look it up online, the American healthcare is by far the most expensive in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at rankings, what the healthcare is compared to other countries, particularly Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and all of the Western Europe is far behind them. It's about number 20. So we pay about double for our healthcare, but yet we are terrible. And in order to get good healthcare in America, you have to have both insurance, which is extremely expensive, as well as money, because there is co-pays and there is deductibles. And then a lot of people go bankrupt. That's one of the biggest reasons for bankruptcy, which here in Western Europe, nobody can even imagine going bankrupt by having to pay for healthcare. That just does not exist. So I would suggest to the Democrats for free that they should have an agenda not only about this, Obamacare, which is also expensive and just probably adds more to the deficit, but just scrap the whole healthcare as it is and go to any country which is better than us and copy the healthcare and bring it over to the USA, because then you will save money and have better healthcare.
Michael, I'm just showing some data on the screen to all of you that backs up exactly what you said, that we are, to take the United Kingdom, for example, we're more than twice as expensive, what we spend on our healthcare compared to the UK.
Michael, as an ardent capitalist, someone pays for the healthcare. In Europe, that's why taxes are so high. So pay me now or pay me later, if in fact we do that. And I agree with you. I agree that healthcare is a right and it should be guaranteed.
Totally. But it's not just the taxes. For example, here they have limits on how much everything costs. So, for example, another statistic is that, let's say, colonoscopy in America costs like 3 times as much than colonoscopy in Germany. And then the other thing is that the insurance, one of the reasons that Luigi Mangione is a hero to some people is because the guy whom he killed, Brian Thompson or whatever his name was,
the United Healthcare
12 million a year, and he was not even the highest paid. The highest paid in United Healthcare is a guy, somebody called Vitti, I think is his second name, and he was making 26 million a year. So that's just a terrible system what we have. So, and then the same United Healthcare would deny people who were looking at medication, buying medications for like $100 a month. So you have this kind of rotten system which needs to be changed. And a lot of countries in Europe, like Switzerland, where I am in now, has also a private healthcare system. And again, we don't have time to go into all of it, but basically it's still private healthcare system, but everybody has to be insured. You cannot have uninsured. And also the maximum out of pocket is about $900, francs, which is now about $1,100 a year. And once you reach that, then it's all covered. So, it's a much, much better system. Nobody can ever go bankrupt paying for healthcare.
Well, don't worry. We have the solution, which is Trump RX.
What's that?
That's Trump's new drug company that he's launching.
Is that so? I didn't even know.
Yeah. Well, if you invest in Trump meme Bitcoin, then you get healthcare with it. It comes with it. It's sort of like when you buy a Happy Meal at McDonald's. You get those little trinkets that the kids like. But it also puts a lot of coin in Trump's bulging pockets as it is now. Can I bring up something that I don't know escaped a lot of people? I think.
Okay.
Why is the leader of America First loaning $20 billion to Argentina? Why? It's absolutely the economy's in the toilet. Number one, and his boy I can't. I pronounce his name, Milieu. I'm not saying his name right. Michael, you're going there soon, so you should basically be able to pronounce the guy's name. They don't buy our exports. They are killing our soybean market because they're buying their soybeans from China. Farmers are getting screwed with this, and hopefully they realize that Trump's not their boy, and yet we're basically going to pay them $20 billion, which we'll never see that money again. Never. As most things with Argentina, whose economy has been in the dumps for a long time.
Well, this is an interesting point. I saw the story, but frankly, I didn't read any sort of analysis about it. What do you make of it? What do you make of it?
It's a vanity purchase from Trump, because this guy was up for the inauguration. He was selling Trump's praises. He likes to consider himself the Trump of Argentina. And right now, his political future is in serious doubt with elections coming up, and things have gotten worse with his leadership. So that's the only thing I can, if you flatter Trump, he basically will do anything for you.
And we see that in South America beyond that look at Brazil. They held their former president, Bolsonaro, responsible for the coup that he tried to organize. And what was Trump's response to them defending their own democracy is, I'm going to slap tariffs on Brazil.
50%.
Because they're treating my friend Jair Bolsonaro meanly. They're so mean. So I'm going to put tariffs on them.
He should have stayed in Florida. He went back. He thought Trump was going to help him. Other than slap a tariff on his country.
I think these tariffs, though, are partially the responsibility of the Congress, because the Constitution does say that tariffs should be imposed, if they are going to be imposed, by the Congress, not by the president. But the Congress has delegated that action to the presidency, and that should be challenged, because
tariffs
are not up to the president.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any confidence that the Supreme Court is going to uphold the lower courts that have basically stated that?
No.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. It'll be interesting to see how they can evade the plain language of the Constitution. That'll be some very interesting legal gymnastics. But we have to abide the event. I have not, as of yet, completely lost faith in the Supreme Court, but I hope that I'm proved right.
Well, maybe they'll issue a ruling overruling the lower courts on tariffs and just not even explain their reasoning, like on the case about racial profiling by police.
Well, at some point. And you're right, Joe. One of the big problems that's gone on here is that these cases have reached the Supreme Court on this so-called shadow docket based on injunctive relief being granted. But some of these cases in the relatively near future are going to be coming before the Supreme Court, and there's going to be full argument on the issues. And that's when I think we're going to find out whether the Supreme Court is still capable of abiding by the Constitution.
The court just started a new session. They just came back into session. One of the first things they did in this new session was they denied an appeal by Ghislaine Maxwell of her conviction on sex trafficking charges. And that is one thing. I mean, we talked about, Judge, you said how a lot of these things we talk about don't really resonate with the general American public. But this Epstein issue does, it seems. This is the one thing that doesn't seem to be going away.
And that's what we said, Joe. You're hitting the nail on the head, not to cut you off, but you are hitting the nail on the head, because we had said that when we've met on previous occasions. I thought the Epstein matter was going to perhaps fade away. And I was wrong. I agree with you. This is something that does resonate, for good or bad, with the public at large. And once again, Marjorie Taylor Greene is on the right side of history.
Isn't it funny? Trump was asked last week about a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, and he kind of skirted the issue and said it's something we're looking into.
Well, that's what I wanted to come to, Bill, is that he was asked about it, and he said, "Oh, I haven't heard that name in so long."
Yeah, he also got his ass spanked by Laura Loomer, that MAGA influencer who was adamantly against this.
But he was asked about Ghislaine Maxwell all summer long. So this idea that he just hasn't even heard her name in so long is just nonsense.
I don't remember her. Who was she?
Well, if he has a cognitive deficit, that would explain it.
And then he said, well, a lot of people ask me for pardons. Puff Daddy just asked me for a pardon. Sean Diddy Combs has not been called Puff Daddy for about 20 years now.
You can't make it up.
So Puff Daddy was fresh in his mind, but Ghislaine Maxwell, who he was asked about all summer long, I haven't heard that name in so long. When's the last time you heard Puff Daddy?
Oh, God.
Yeah, well, but again, if he doesn't...
if we don't laugh about this stuff, we really would cry.
You would cry. You're right.
He really says things. It's like completely a stream of consciousness. He doesn't even care what he's saying. Yeah, to say that about Maxwell is such a patent fraud.
And then even beyond that, Caitlin Collins from CNN, who was asking the question, said, well, she was convicted of sex trafficking. And he said, well, that's something I'm going to have to look into. Like, if you don't remember who she is, she was convicted of sex trafficking. That should be the end of the conversation.
Well, they should have just basically put the picture of him and her and
here she is at your wedding.
Melania together. Like there's tons of footage.
Well, I hear there is a congresswoman, Democrat, who was elected in Arizona, and she will be the vote that's going to unseal those files, which nobody...
And conveniently, Mike Johnson refused to seat her prior to the shutdown.
Yeah, but he will have to eventually. So, but again, the question is, I have kind of a lot of questions. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is something there which we don't know, because this guy, when he died, he had $900 million, so how did he make all that money? That there must have been a lot of well-known people involved here, and they probably don't want the names, they don't want them to come out, because how could you make $900 million when he was a teacher, without a certificate, and he didn't do well when he worked for Lehman Brothers, and he made all his money supposedly as a financial advisor to these wealthy people, but I think he was more of a pimp to these people. And, in order to make that much money, there must have been, these people must have paid him millions,
Right.
So
he had a lot of close friends, obviously.
Right.
All right. He had a lot of close friends. And I do want to just add, I think that we have to look at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. to see the statue of Trump and Epstein holding hands, best friends for life, or whatever it says.
But it wasn't just Trump. It was Clinton. It was Bill Gates.
Oh, it's
It's in, that's why Biden was in charge for 4 years, so he didn't publish it either. So I think there are people who are powerful people on both sides, who kind of are involved.
I think that's probably true. But
politics, no strange bedfellows. When did you ever hear out of Trump's mouth somebody saying some nice things about Bill Clinton? Or, because basically he said Clinton had nothing to do with it.
Well, there was one of the Republicans, I don't remember who it was exactly, a few weeks ago, who said that everybody on Epstein's client list were just a bunch of Democratic billionaires. But if you're talking about the time period of Epstein's crimes, Donald Trump was a Democrat at that time. So he still fits into what this Republican, whoever it was, I don't remember who exactly, was saying, which is he was a Democratic billionaire. So I don't know. Yeah, and again, Pam Bondi yesterday was asked a lot of questions about Epstein, and she refused to answer any of them. And every time she just said, well, I'm not answering that because you just don't like Donald Trump. Why
Well,
can't you give us answers?
the best thing that was said yesterday at that hearing was when Dick Durbin said, "You're refusing to answer these questions now, but you're going to answer them in the future." And I took that not really so much as a threat, but as stating what, as you said earlier, the oversight committee and their authority. And at some point, this is going to come to. At some point, this is going to come to a head. And just to add my 2 cents in about Pam Bondi, I actually thought that when she was appointed Attorney General, that perhaps we would have somebody who would be halfway interested in justice.
We said that when we had an episode about her appointment.
Yeah, and of course, unfortunately, I've been proved wrong on that point. She is really, really a disgrace, and as you said earlier, she is strictly a political animal.
I mean,
that's all there is to it.
Yeah. Let's just.
But I must say, she is a good plastic surgeon.
Yes, you know what? She does look 10 years younger.
I mean, it's exhausting, really, when you think about all the stuff, even since we last recorded, which was a month or two ago. Just think about the members of his cabinet. We have Pete Hegseth, who had this disgraceful event with the generals and the admirals.
The fat generals.
Yeah, the fat generals with
but not the fat president.
No.
With beards are not part of a fighting warrior ethos, which as a Civil War historian, I had taken issue with because I'm pretty sure Ulysses S. Grant and William T. Sherman were pretty good warriors, and they both had beards. But
Stonewall Jackson.
We have, whichever side they want to praise because they love the Confederacy. Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee both had beards. So
that's why he'd take his statue down.
you have Bobby Kennedy, who talked about, we haven't all taken Tylenol recently, have we? Are we all okay?
No.
When he's an investor in a competitor for Tylenol, so I'm sure that has nothing to do with.
Well, he cannot get pregnant, so you don't have to worry.
And we have Pam Bondi, and who else do we have in the cabinet? Kash Patel is a joke. I mean, we knew that from the beginning. It's nice to not know the names of some Trump cabinet members because the ones you do know are all disasters.
One fellow who I've seen interviewed a couple of times, who's in the cabinet, who speaks intelligently and in measured tones.
Well, you're not talking about Howard Lutnick then. So
no. That, and you know who's disappeared is probably perhaps one of the people in our country who is perhaps the loudest, biggest mouth, Peter Navarro.
Oh, yeah.
Navarro.
Yes.
Peter Navarro has disappeared. Okay.
Yeah. He got his
Maybe
pardon.
he's in Argentina. I don't know.
He got his pardon, Eddie. So he's happy. He crawled back into the woodwork.
But just to finish my thought, seriously, I did see the Secretary of Transportation interviewed yesterday on CNBC, Sean Duffy. And I have to say, he struck me as being a legitimate public servant. And I was actually impressed with the guy. He wasn't just spouting. Anytime you have a guest on who's from the Trump administration, it seems like they are compelled to mention the name President Trump at least a half dozen times, saying President Trump.
Or exalted ruler.
Oh, yeah, well, but I'm just adding that this fellow seemed to be on the level.
Well, a lot of their talking points sound better in the original North Korean, but you get someone gets transferred.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ed. I mean, he seems kind of very reasonable, and I also think that Rubio is okay. I think this guy Scott Bessent is okay. So there are some people who are. I mean, they all have to what's called kiss ass because that's the only way they can survive with Trump. But some of them, I think, they just do it in order to, basically still carry favor, but they still are doing reasonable, there are still reasonable people who are trying to do the pretty good job. So I think Rubio is okay, and Bessent.
Rubio has not had a serious involvement in any negotiations with Gaza, with Ukraine. After basically, little Marco has basically adopted the Trump party line, and I think just wants to sustain himself in that position because his career is over after this.
Well, who knows? Who knows?
It depends how Trump,
it depends. I think he's kind of positioning himself. That's true because he's going to be a potential candidate for the president. But the question is, how to kind of position himself, against J.D. Vance, who is the other possibility. But I think a lot of it is just...
Or his fellow Floridian who's waiting in the weeds.
But I think a lot of it is going to depend on how Trump does economically. If the economy falters, then he's done. But if the economy does well, which so far has been doing okay, the inflation is not bad, and the stock market is up despite the government shutdown. So we will see, but it's too early to say. He's got another, 3.5 years.
Well, and they announced they're just not going to release job numbers anymore, so that takes care of that problem.
Yeah. But, as everybody says, it's the economy is stupid, right? So as long as people are happy and are making money and are doing well, they will enjoy that. So it will depend ultimately how he does.
Michael, there are a lot of people who are suffering greatly right now.
And so
whether they are mobilized or not, that's another story.
Well, let's stop.
Every time of human history, they were rich and they were poor. So it matters as to the average. But let's say if inflation went back up to 12% or that number, and if suddenly a lot of people lost their jobs, then it will be done.
Well, let's not pass this giant bailout for American farmers and see how Trump's popularity does in middle America and places like North Carolina then.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming to the end here of our season debut. Woo! We got a few predictions. We only pointed out the judge having our first prediction of the season, but I'm sure there's plenty to come because we love prognosticating. We don't have a high batting average, but we do like making predictions.
In elections.
Yeah. But let's go around, get everybody's last thoughts, what you're watching over this next week, and hopefully we'll be able to record on next week when I have this same schedule, where I have this hour period, and get on a more regular schedule here to kick off the new season. So, Doctor, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, one thing we haven't talked about is that potential Gaza deal, the peace deals. I'm watching that as to whether something will come out of it, as far as release of the refugees and some of the other possibilities. And, for me, the main issue, again, which we haven't talked about, but hopefully talk about in the next sessions or next podcast, is the astronomical debt that America has. There is something called the Ferguson principle, which is that if the interest payments for the debt are more than the national defense, then that country will no longer be a superpower. So, and neither of the parties are addressing that issue, which is just, I think, if anything is going to bring us down, that is going to be it. So that's just my 5 cents.
5 cents is worthless these days in this economy. Bill?
5 gold cents.
Bill?
Two things that are tied together. I was very, very fearful of what came out of that meeting with the generals. And the quotes that came out in particular were that get ready to fight the enemy from within. I think it's going to be critical that the Supreme Court rules on the issuing of National Guardsmen, which were under the state control in places like Chicago or Portland, Oregon. Because honestly, can you see the ramifications of the utilization of the military during election time, or potentially the suspension of elections? And I would not put anything past this administration. So when I hear words like or Trump basically saying with glee, urging the armed forces to fight with them, to use violence against them, saying they spit, we hit, or get ready to fight Americans. I mean, that is scary, scary stuff, Michael. And I hope you will join me on the ramparts if that stuff comes to pass.
We will die together, Bill. We will die standing up.
And we will all go down together.
I would prefer that. I prefer to die in bed in about 10 years, 15 years. Give me 15 more.
Next episode, should we just all be in Les Mis outfits? We can sing One Day More. Go off to the barricades. Judge?
Well, this is really not much of a prognostication, but I do think that, as Billy alluded to, I think that the outreach from the Republicans concerning the healthcare issue, as minimal as it is going to be the opening for the Democrats to bring this government shutdown to an end. And frankly, we cannot continue. We cannot continue with the government shutdown. So I'm hoping that that's going to come to pass.
And because it is the one thing that seems to stick to Donald Trump with the regular people of America, I'm very curious just to see what further developments happen with everything related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell over this next couple weeks, especially if the government does reopen. As you mentioned, we have this new congresswoman from Arizona, Thomas Massie, the Kentucky Republican, who's been trying to rally support to force the release of the Epstein files, whatever those will look like. Would be the tie-breaking vote to make that happen. So if the government does reopen, I am curious to see what happens in that regard. That is one issue that Trump just can't seem to escape, no matter how much he forgets everything between the Puff Daddy era and this morning. So we'll see. Listeners, certainly reach out to us. Let us know what you're watching for, what your thoughts are on the recent news. We can be reached as always at Wigs for Wigs. That is WIGSFORWHIGS @gmail.com. We love hearing from you, and you could hear your thoughts on a future episode. So everybody, stay well out there, stay informed, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Wigs for Wigs. Take care, everybody. The views expressed in Wigs for Wigs are purely those of the individual speakers and are not meant in any way to represent the views of any places of employment or other organizations.